Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please drop them in the Q&A component of the webinar dashboard, and we'll address as many as we can throughout the presentation. Rebecca, we'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rebecca Petrilli, and I am a Themis Attorney Director, and I am very excited to host today's panel with Dawn Young, who is the Director of Academic Skills and an Adjunct Professor and Writing Specialist at the Chicago-Kent College of Law, Professor Christopher Ide-Don, who's the Assistant Dean for Academic Success at UC Davis School of Law, and Professor Kirsha Trychta, Teaching Professor and Academic Excellence Center Director at the West Virginia University College of Law. So we have a really great, exciting discussion for you today that's going to go over lots of different strategies and tips and tricks that you can take to work your way through some first semester grade blues, or even if you got really wonderful grades that you're proud of, things that you can do to improve your study strategies and tactics moving through this semester and through the remainder of your time in law school. So we have lots of things to talk about, but we also really want you to have the opportunity to ask questions. So please feel free to use that Q&A function that was mentioned at the beginning whenever, and Bobby Arnold, my Themis colleague, will be monitoring that chat for us and letting us know when questions come through. So unless there are any questions right away, I say we go ahead and get started. Awesome. So the first thing that we want to talk about is just, what do grades actually mean, right? How should you interpret them? What do you do if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by, seeing your first semester grades? Law school is such a different experience from anything that any of us ever did before we got there. For most, I would say for most of us, at least, it's very different from anything you did before. And how do you move through this? So any of the panelists, if you would like to start. You're muted.
I'd be happy to start just because it is so dear to my heart. Yeah, I put myself in your shoes. Looking back to when I received my first semester grades, I didn't do great. And I just wanted to start it off like this. Countless of dedicated and hardworking law graduates have very successful, meaningful careers in law. And they did not necessarily have good grades in law school. So I just wanted to start off with that. Number two, never once in practicing law did I ever have a client come into my office and ask me what I got on torts. Okay, nobody asked you for your grade transcript in terms of clients. So what they care about is that you are a dedicated attorney, that you're a problem solver, and that you care. And I just want to start it off with that. So does anybody have any thoughts on bad grades?
I'll follow up with Professor Young and share my own personal journey. During my first semester of law school, I actually did quite poorly, and I ended the fall semester on academic probation, which was quite a shock coming in magna cum laude and a hard science background from a pretty prestigious state school as a shock. But what I did was I went asking around, and I found a professor who could talk to me the way that things made sense. And I was able to meet with that professor one-on-one over a couple of months in spring. And by spring, the end of spring semester, it was a whole different ballgame when I sat for those exams. I felt prepared. I felt like so embarrassed for what I had done in the fall, but also so empowered that this was something I was able to achieve in the spring. And I continued working with that professor my entire law school career. And I ended up graduating 23rd in my class from bottom 10. And that's all from just recognizing it wasn't working and being willing to try new things and being willing to adapt to new strategies. And so hopefully over the next 45 minutes or so, we can be those mini professors for you. You're going to have to find your own after the session, but if we can get you pointed off in the right direction about some new strategies that you'll be able to implement, and you'll be able to see that growth through your next 6 semesters as well.
I'll add a quick few notes. I think that those advice is great, and a similar boat, right? I opened up my grades after fall and said, oh, okay, this is a wake-up call. Apparently everybody is brilliant and perhaps more smart than me. I'll say one thing I think is important to remember: grades do not define you. This is an important piece of, I've worked with students now for many years, and you were the same honestly wonderful person before you opened that email or opened that website. So the grades are just this one sliver of, I'll call it just feedback on how the fall semester went. So they do not define you as a person. Maybe limit that, as they are just summative feedback, as we say, just, hey, this is how I did on maybe a midterm and a final, and it's feedback for me to then take some next steps with. So no more than that.
Yeah, 100%. I can chime in and say that I also did not get great grades my first semester of law school. And coming from being a student, you know, we all come into law school, we are hardworking, we are talented, we are people who strive to achieve, right? We wouldn't be in law school if that weren't the case. But the reality of law school is that the way you're studying for exams, the way you are expected to learn, it's all very, very different, right? And so just as everybody else on this panel said, you're not defined by this, and there's the only place you can go from grades that aren't what you wanted them to be is up, right? So hopefully you take away at least a few nuggets of wisdom from this. And yeah, any questions so far? Oh, I do see one.
Yeah, there is one question in the Q&A. This actually came from the the surveyed questions that came ahead of time. If the case method is not how someone best learns, what are ways to balance class readings and the cases and trying to learn the rules and doctrine? That comes from Claire W.
That's a great question. I'm going to pass that to the people who teach the law because that's not me.
Yeah, I can chime in. I think what you want to do is always have your eyes on the horizon. I always tell my students, when you go to class, before you go to class and you prepare, you read the cases, during class and post-class, your eyes should be always looking towards the horizon, and that's the final exam. And so the case method, the reason why professors assign cases is because they want to help you figure out how to extract the law, right? So we're trying to think about the big picture. And so there might be a case on one specific element of a rule, right? There might be another case that talks about the second element of that rule, right? So reading those cases, taking a look at that syllabus and getting the big picture, figuring out, okay, where am I? This is contracts. Okay, we're talking about offer and acceptance. So these cases tend to be between an offeree and offerer, right? So there's a purpose behind that. It's not just because they want you to go through torture. It's because they want you to learn how to synthesize the rules.
I'll add on to that briefly. I do agree, the case method, it's not just we do it because we've always done it. The cases really are examples of how the law plays out and how it's applied. So I will get people who say, why do we do this? Why don't you just give me the set of rules and I'll memorize it and then walk in and take a test? The cases are actually samples of, hey, look, remember this case where the person pulls the chair out? Well, that's relevant for intent. And then you might get an exam question that is reminiscent of it, right? So cases are, I guess we could say, mini hypos or getting you ready for it. For people who maybe the case method doesn't resonate, going to what Professor Young said, I've worked with students over the years. I love the idea of you can go pull final exams, which might feel a little bit early this semester, but there's nothing wrong with jumping ahead. See if you can find final exams for your current professors. Maybe take a look and see where this is all going, and that might inform you as to how to read your cases and balance the learning of the law and where to spend your time. So sometimes the work backwards method can be helpful.
I agree with my co-panelist, and I would kind of synthesize it even further down to say, I think every case is in the book for one of three reasons. And if you can identify that and then let the rest go, let the rest cut the fat, let the noise go. The case is either there because it is a perfect statement of the rule. The judge, the opinion writer did a really nice job summarizing the law, and that's its sole function in the book, is to give you a nice restatement of the law. Or as Professor Ide-Don explained, it's an example, and it's either an example of where the rule worked and the party was able to establish all of the elements or prongs of the test, or where the rule failed. And if you can recognize it's either this example, or a perfect statement of the law, then you've got what you need out of that particular case, and you can move on. And the key is to be able to do that in concert with the table of contents, right? So if the case is in a section called consideration or in a section called felony murder, your example or your statement of the law has to tie to that. So there's lots of other stuff in the case. We don't care about that stuff right now. We only care, is an example of felony murder working or not working, if that's the section of the book that it's in. Otherwise, let it go. Don't worry about it.
Great answers from everybody. Thank you. So moving back to the process of getting through, learning that your grades weren't what you wanted them to be, et cetera, emotion can definitely be a barrier that prevents us from moving forward as we go through this process. And in our meeting prior to this event where we were discussing, how are we going to be as helpful as possible to students, we spent a very long time talking about this, right? How do you move past feeling like you weren't, achieving the things that you wanted to achieve? It's normal to be disappointed, and it's normal to be, upset and frustrated, and no one's saying that you shouldn't feel those things. But how can you work past that to make sure that you're not spending time dwelling on this and instead are putting your energy towards improving and making those changes that are going to make your grades look a lot more like what you wanted coming to these finals? So does anybody in particular want to start? Yeah.
I do. I call this the negative downward spiral of thinking, right? So when you get those first semester grades, if you didn't do as well as you thought you would be doing, your thought process is, I'm a lousy law student. I don't belong here. I'm an imposter. I'm doomed to fail. No one is ever going to hire me. And then you go down this, long list of parade of horribles. And I'm here to say, stop thinking like that. That's number one. And these are three things that I want to say. Number one, you have to recognize that these feelings are just thoughts, right? They're not reality. It's not real. So are you really going to be doomed to be this horrible lawyer? No. Number two, it's important to put it in perspective. You've just been thrown into this completely different world, right? I mean, a rigorous curriculum, the Socratic method, a different teaching style, a new style of writing, a new style of everything. The exam format is completely different from anything you've ever experienced before. And then you're subject to this strict grading curve where only a very few amount of A's are given. So be kind to yourself for number two. Number three, this is the golden nugget. It's to take action. So now that we've got that, we've dealt with that emotion. Now it's time to move on. So if you want to improve your grades second semester, you've got to be humble. That's the word. And it's being honest with yourself and taking a real good look at what you did last semester and tweak your study strategies so that you can fuel success for this semester. And so it really is looking back to move forward.
That is wonderful advice. Thank you, Dawn.
Sure.
Professor Ide-Don, Professor Trychta, either of you have anything to say?
Yeah, I can add just a few. I think that's spot on advice. And one thought here is definitely taking a moment to process it. Whenever I get news that maybe is not the best news, we're always taught to reframe it, right? So maybe the grades aren't what we want. Definitely feel that the emotions, disappointment, frustration, maybe resentment toward it. If you can, right, trying to push past that and then say, okay, this is helpful information, right? So I was reframed bad news as this is helpful information. And then from there, trying to view it as I call it, embrace the challenge, right? You may have heard that in another more crude way, embrace the blank, but embracing the challenge of law school, right? So fall 1L, hey, this was tough. Maybe I didn't get the results or the ultimate summative grade I was looking for, but you're building towards something. And I really think that's where I go back to, why did you come to law school in the first place, right? And as Professor Young said, you're building, see the horizon. It's not just for a grade by any means. It's to be able to pass that bar exam, number one. And then number two, to be able to do what you came to law school for. So we may have a lot of strong feelings about law school. I think all of us do, but we know that it's worth it at the end of the day. So I'll pass that on.
Yeah.
I think it's really important also to remember that science backs up the idea that if you're emotionally dwelling in a negative place, you're not going to be able to absorb new information in a positive way. And so the sooner that you can just kind of, take a breath, let it move past, then you're going to be able to start learning new information. I think about it, I always have that flashback from Legally Blonde, when Elle Woods has her moment where she's not going to take it anymore. She's not going to be at the bottom. She's tired of getting bad grades and being embarrassed in class. And she makes some action, right? And so the key here is, even if you're kind of mentally not ready to do that, start engaging in actions anyway that are positive towards new learning, and your brain will kind of catch up with you. Force yourself to do things that you might not feel ready for, like reaching out to your academic support professor or meeting with a writing specialist, and really get the ball rolling, because the semester is short, right? All of a sudden midterms will be here, and then finals will be here. And if you're waiting till the moment when you actually, quote unquote, feel ready to kind of take the next step, it might be too late. So just jump. Someone in your building wants to catch you and wants to help. And so look into your, around your office, ask around who's the go-to person at your law school that will catch you, and they'll be excited to kind of get you on the next steps.
We've got actually a couple of questions coming in. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say that's such a wonderful point. I just wanted to mention, like, the resources available to you in your law school, right? There are people there who are definitely interested in helping you. And if you can find somebody who's, teaching style, I think that was mentioned, that you resonate with, or somebody whose lecture style really vibes with the way you take notes, things like that, right? Going to that professor and saying, hey, I really need a little bit of help. They're going to jump at the chance to help you. And just as a personal anecdote, after my first semester of grades, I was very unhappy, obviously, as we've all been discussing. And I went and I sat down with my criminal law professor and I said, please help me understand, why my grade is the way that it is, because reading through this, I feel like I answered these questions. And he walked me through every single question on that exam and was like, over and over, here, you got the law right, but you didn't do any analysis. And that was my really big sticking point on all of my exams that semester. And hearing that from him, somebody who I liked and who I trusted, made it so much easier for me to be like, oh yeah, he's right. And then I was able to change that behavior, right? So just something to think about. And I know Bobby was going to jump in because we have a bunch of questions. So I want to make sure that everybody gets their questions answered. So we'll pivot to those for a moment. We have one question that was directed at Professor Trychta. So what are some specific things your mentor or professor helped you work on to improve your grades?
So I didn't know, but I was doing really well in legal writing compared to all of my other courses. So any course that required an exam, I was doing terrible in. But in legal writing, I was doing fine. And he was able to sit down with me and explain what we called, in education parlance, transference. That is, I knew how to do a skill in one arena. I knew how to do legal writing, and I didn't understand it's the same skill on an exam. It's just a lot faster. And minus the E if it's a CREAC. So he was able to take something I understood, which was how to do a basic CREAC in legal writing at home on my own, and show me how to transfer that to a time-crunched closed book exam. And so always start with something good. You learned something in fall, even if it doesn't feel like it. There is some skill or strategy that you are doing well. And that's why I think meeting with your professor is so important. As Rebecca indicated, she could write a rule, right? And then you build from there. And so for me, it was learning how to take something that I could do at home at my own pace and converting it to a closed book timed exam. That was the real game changer for me. The other big thing was I had arrived at law school convinced it was somehow going to be different, because that's what everyone tells you. So I didn't use any of my old undergraduate study strategies, even though they had served me very well in undergrad. I got this idea that I had to study different because everyone in orientation kept saying law school is different. And so there were things like I took notes by hand in undergrad and I was real good at it. I didn't take a single note by hand my fall semester because I had my laptop now. I ended up not using my laptop the entire spring semester and went back to what I knew, which was how to take really good handwritten notes. I was really good at doing practice problems. That's how I learned, is that I didn't do that in fall semester because I didn't think I had time. And so I stopped outlining and I just ran hypo after hypo after hypo in the spring. And so really what it was taking a deep breath, figuring out what I had done really well before things fell apart, and ask myself, why did I stop doing those things that I was good at, and reinvent them in a new positive way for law school.
Awesome answer. Thank you for that. Our next question actually kind of ties directly into what we were just talking about. So the question is, well, it's not phrased as a question, but we'll call it a question anyway. My main issue was application of the law to the facts. I knew the rules very well, but got all stressed out during the exam, did not know where to start, and time flew by way too fast. I hear this so much from students who are studying for the bar exam. It was obviously my problem, as I just illustrated to all of you, right? This is a super common issue that students go through. So you're definitely not alone. And I am certain that our panelists here are going to have some wisdom for you on that one.
I guess my advice would be, if you identify time as an issue for you, you've got to do these hypos when there's low stakes, right? So if you can do, I always like give the analogy, I've got like my coffee cup, I've got my music in the background, I'm handling this like really a very short, it could be a very short hypo, like a paragraph, and just kind of, diagram how you would answer that. You get comfortable. Then after a couple of weeks, right, you'll actually time yourself. You're like, okay, maybe I should do this, like pretend I'm actually like sitting in there taking the exam. You've got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So it's like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So hypo a day can help you with the end game, which is that final exam. So I completely agree with Kirsha that you should be, I always tell my students to have this voracious appetite, where you're just like eating everything. Eat as many hypos as you can because they're good for you, right?
Yeah, to echo what both my panelists said, I want to jump onto that and just say that hypo is really, so if you're looking for how can I turn it around, how can I do well in my new classes, how can I draw generalizations right across the curriculum, maybe I feel like I know the law really well, and also how to deal with exam stress, right? It's just doing those hypotheticals. I view it as a feedback loop, right? Throw yourself into a hypo tomorrow, right? It's Friday. Instead of enjoying the weekend, maybe carve out even just 1 hour to do one short hypo. Maybe it takes finding a classmate. Like, let's commit to doing one hypo a week together. It's going to lower the anxiety, but it's also really helpful information. When you do a hypo, you figure out if you actually know the law, and if you know the law, then maybe you go to a TA, a tutor, a professor, peer, feedback there, and you figure out if it's an application issue. And if you do that on a weekly basis, it's like any skill, you're just practicing that skill. So when the big game, let's call it, comes up, you've already gotten those muscles and you've trained yourself to be ready.
So I just dropped a formula into the chat. Any student who tells me that they understand the rules, but either are struggling with application, struggling with time, or in your situation, both, I tell them that there is a formula, just use it. Stop trying to come up with really creative, thoughtful ways to write your paragraphs. That is for legal writing, that is for ABA, that is when you have time at home to sit down and edit and think about sentence structure. When you are on a time-crunched exam, there is a formula that will guarantee you points every single time. And it requires you to have a really good rule. Good news is you said that's not a problem, right? So here, whatever your test is, whatever your rule is, it either has elements or prongs. And it has prong 1, prong 2, prong 3, or element 1, element 2, element 3. You're going to write all your rules that way. And then your analysis paragraph is going to follow it step by step every single time. We are not thinking about different ways to vary it. It's not worth your time. So element 1 is or is not here because, finish that sentence with some fact from the fact pattern. Element 2 is or is not present because. And you're like, oh, that's so boring. Professors don't care about boring. They're like point, point, point. I will be smiling at how boring but solid this essay is. I don't care about transition sentences. I don't care about varying sentence length on a time crunched exam. And so let go of thinking about writing and just get the meat and potatoes part of your answer using a really strict formula. And PS, it's fantastic for the bar too. So if you get really good in law school, you'll be killing it come bar time.
Yeah, I just wanted.
Please go ahead. No,
I just wanted to piggyback on what you just said. I definitely think for law school exams, you've got to understand that IRAC, it's very formulaic, and that should kind of bring down your stress level. Make sure you're arguing both sides, and there's a magic word, and the magic word is because. So if you say, right, so the element number 1 is satisfied because, and then you add those determinative facts, you're golden. You've applied, right, the rule to this factual scenario. So that's a magic word, because, and understand that IRAC is formulaic and use it.
oh, I love this. This was such a great discussion. That's exactly how I tell students to do their essays for the bar exam too, right? And going back to the discussion about do hypo after hypo after hypo, do you have any idea how many essays you're going to be writing when you're studying for the bar? That's like probably half of your practice while you're studying, right? Is just practice essay, outline and issue spot, right? Over and over and over and over again, because the more pieces of information, ways of questions being presented to you, et cetera, that you're exposed to, the easier it's going to be for you to start spotting those things when you're tested on them. We have a question now that is very interesting, and I'm going to pose it to the group and we can just kind of see where it goes, but I'll just read it. In discussing my experiences with final exams and grades with my peers, many of us come to the conclusion that the process is retrograde and silly. Can anyone defend the purpose of evaluating students on the basis of a single long exam and then grading based on an imposed curve such that minute distinctions result in significant differences in the final grade? In other words, why should I even care about improving my grade after the first semester if I may not buy into the mechanics of the system anymore?
So I'll take a stab at going first. And I think the big issue here is you can be right, and also it still can be the wrong thing to do. And what I mean by that is I don't disagree with you. I will tell my faculty over and over and over again that I am mad at them if they give a single exam at the end of the semester, that they are doing students a disservice. So I think you're right there. I totally agree. But, right? Or as they teach you in when you're trying to convince someone of something, not but and, that is to say that if you want to be successful on an exam, you have to recognize that's how it's coming at you, right? And so it doesn't mean you agree with the method. It doesn't mean that you think it's a good idea, but it is the parameters by which the game has been set to play. And so you either have to want to play the game or you decide you don't, right? If you find the rules of the game are so unfair, you can walk away. That's always an option. But you can't let the rules of the game stomp your feet and say, I don't like it, and then be mad when you lose the game. You either get in the game and play by the terrible rules drafted by some Socratic old men a long, long time ago, or you don't. And I know that that's a really harsh way to think about it, but the reality is you can't change what the professor's going to do. You can only change how you can respond to it.
Yeah, and if I could jump in too, I touched on it a little bit earlier. I love the idea of you got to play the game, and also remembering, right, at the end of this 3 years of law school, we have a bar exam, and that absolutely requires an IRAC-based approach, and even in the practice of law. And one thing I want to point out that I think is really amazing and cool, you don't know this, but Professor Trychta is on the East Coast, Professor Young's in the middle, and I'm all the way on the West Coast. We get together, we meet up for the first time, and we all view how to perform well on exams and the bar and what good legal writing looks like the same. We've never met, right? We're all across the United States. And even when we practice law, I think there's certain standards where you write a certain way, you speak a certain way, and for better or for worse, it all comes back to IRAC.
My former boss at my old school and my current faculty at my new school repeatedly mentioned that even in memos that I write to the faculty, I will IRAC them. And they're like, you can just shoot us a quick email. I'm like, no. I was like, the issue presented for us was, here's the rule from the catalog for the Academic Standards Committee. That's just how we roll. So yeah, it's actually really freeing. I think students find it to be kind of this evil beast, but once you learn it's your friend, it makes things so much easier.
I just wanted to add to that, when you have real clients, it's very similar to a hypothetical. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. Your client's going to come to you and give you a whole bunch, like a story. And stories are hypotheticals or, exam questions, right? Essay exam questions. So you have to listen to the whole story. You've got to view all these documents and you've got to figure out what is the legal issue in this big blurb of facts, right? So, and what is the applicable rule? So in essence, it's preparing you for real life. So what you were saying before, Dean Ide-Don, about thinking about your higher purpose. Why are you in law school? Most of you want to have a career in law. And so that requires, if you're going to practice, passing the bar exam. And so we've got to think about our higher purpose.
Absolutely. And the good news is that once you get through this and pass the bar exam, you can be part of, helping to affect change in the legal profession, if that's what you want to see, right? But until then, unfortunately, like everybody said, you got to just play the game. It does get easier to play it once you figure out how to IRAC though. Like everybody said, it's one of those things where you figure out this formula and it starts to come to you. It's like muscle memory. So there is hope for that. Going off of that, we have a question that says, what is the core thing that you figured out that allowed you to turn your grades around? For me, it was talking to my professor. Truly, it was talking to my professor, figuring out, oh, I haven't been studying right for this because I haven't been practicing the analysis. And from then on out, I was able to, focus my studying to be something that allowed me to learn not just the rules, but also how to apply it. That looks different for everybody. So I'll open it up to the floor now, but just wanted to share that.
I think I shared my answer to this already, in that it was for me recognizing that IRAC worked everywhere, not just at on or CREAC, and also that they are in fact the same thing. They're just the little brother. You hear TRAC, SURAC, CREAC, CRAC, IRAC. It's all the same. It's just people trying to brand it up and get a new law review article published. It is all the same. So don't get lost in that. The other thing I think, and this isn't for me necessarily, but the biggest thing I see for my students who have a really big pivot between fall and spring is one of two things. Either, depending on how your law school's classes are structured, the course material can be something that resonates very differently. So the 1L classes are kind of split. There are some really rules-based, very, very structured classes like torts and crim. And then there are some more kind of policy and historical foundational based classes like policy or like property and con law, and to some extent contracts. And so depending on what semesters those courses arrive, you can see a real shift in your grades if your mindset or your background is more aligned with one or the other type of course material. So I see that in big for students who have big shifts. And then the other big thing I see for students who have a really big turnaround, besides engaging with their whoever they're going to use as their resource in the building, It's making sure that there's no noise outside of the building that's interfering with their ability to be successful. It doesn't matter how much you go to academic support or go to the writing center if you have some external issue that persists. If you've got a sickness or a family member or financial trouble. I think I saw a question in the Q&A about being a non-traditional student. You have to be able to develop some skills for those things, or you can't really expect a huge difference in outcome if you're not able to dedicate the amount of time that you need in the right ways, because it's not just quantity, it's quality too. And so those are the two biggest things I see for my students who see big shifts.
I think I just wanted to add to that. One thing that I would recommend students to do to improve their grades is to be very disciplined in their time management, because it's easy to let the outside world sort of, interfere from our studies. So that's number one. But number two, the law is very foundational. So if you've missed what was discussed in class 1 and you were confused about it and you're like, you know what, I'll eventually figure it out, on the weekend, what happens is you're already prepping for, your second or third class. And then if you've missed that concept and you were confused with it, then you're going to be even more confused the second class. And so you'll only understand the law on a very surface level. And that's maybe just memorizing or just being very familiar with the words on the page. Like, oh, I've seen this before. I think it's an element. I think I'm good to go. I know it's an element. But what happens is when you're actually sitting there in the exam, your professor is testing you on not only the law, but nuances and exceptions and taking a much deeper dive into the issues. So if you only know it on a surface level, you're kind of screwed. So, so it's really important to stay disciplined. If you don't understand something, try to get that gap in knowledge understood right away, because then it'll be like this big snowball, right? And you'll get crushed. If that's a good visual.
Yeah, I definitely echo those, the great advice there. And I'll add that Bobby just dropped a link into a document here. I cannot take credit for this. This has been created over the years by our wonderful student tutors and TAs at my law school. I've had a little, more than a little help with this, but I think if we're thinking about how do I change and perform better on exams, we have to take a quick look back. So this worksheet here, it's a fillable PDF. Feel free to add your own categories, right? But this is just a moment to reflect back. So we got to look backwards to go forward type idea. And really looking at everything you did in the fall, from reading, going to class, briefing, et cetera, breaking it down. What are all the different study processes you did do? How often did you do them? And then also, how helpful were they now in retrospect? And then there's a great right-hand column there, just asking some hard questions of yourself, right? You're always going to want to be reflecting on it. And then after you do this reflection piece, you might seek out a professor, your academic support team, and say, okay, here's what I've identified. I need some assistance here in figuring out how to, adapt or modify my processes to move forward. So it is going to usually be very person dependent. Some other things have been touched on that are great, but I want to morph this now into oftentimes we find time management being a piece. So this is touching on some of the future questions, but I'm big on setting, using a timer, right? So there's different methods. There's the Pomodoro technique, there's study block technique, but if you find that time is an issue, setting really strict boundaries of, I will study for an hour and a half and then take a break, and then maybe another hour and a half and then take another break. But having these strict boundaries along how much time you spend on different tasks, and certainly prioritizing the ones that are most helpful to you.
Absolutely. And that is our next question about time management. So I'm glad that we started there. The question is, do you have suggestions for time management with class prep, specifically how to prepare for classes faster and more efficiently? The student says it takes over 3 hours to read, brief, take notes for just one class. So that makes it difficult to fit multiple classes in a study period, which is super valid, right? A lot of weeks you're being expected to read, what, 200 pages? That's a lot for any student to take in. So this will be great. This will be very helpful for everybody, I'm sure.
I have two strategies to speed up case reading. So it's called SQ3R, and I didn't create this. It's just a method that lots of academic support professors use. And it's survey, question, read, recite, and review. So the idea is when you read a case, lawyers read cases differently than law students. They've actually done scientific studies where they'll watch the eyes and see how they read. You want to stop reading like a law student and start reading like a lawyer. And the things that lawyers do is they read the case caption first and they anchor the case in a world. So they're surveying their landscape. Where is it appearing in the book? Or what do its West headnotes look like? What jurisdiction is it? What time is it? And they begin to then ask themselves questions. Oh, this case came out of Massachusetts in this time period by this judge. And they're already thinking that means something. There's value in that. And that's super important when you're in comma, by the way. And so you want to say, oh, this case came out of the South in the 60s. Immediately, you can put that into historical context. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to read the case, but I want you to read it slightly differently than you normally would. You're going to read the first paragraph and the last paragraph. The idea is you want to know the ending before you even begin the journey. So get the lay of the land with the first paragraph and then skip to the last paragraph and find out who won. And so then you finish reading the case. And there now you're not wondering, it's not a suspense novel. You know how it's going to end. You've Quentin Tarantino the thing, and now you're just filling in the middle. And as you fill in the middle, you want to do so Hemingway style. And what I mean by that is, for those of you who don't know, Hemingway famously wrote a 6-word story. And so you want to do the same thing in a sentence. What's going on in the middle, right? Give me the 10,000 foot view. And then that's what you're taking to class. And then you use class as the opportunity to review what you've done. So you're doing enough preparatory work before class that you have some sense of what the case is, but you're not trying to solve the mystery on your own before class. Especially if you're struggling with case reading. You could sit there for 5 hours. I could tell you in 2 minutes what the case is about, and you wasted all of that time. I need you prepared enough that you can engage in conversation. I don't need you to figure it out completely on your own at home. That's not the best use of your time. What the best use of your time is getting familiar enough so you can have a conversation in class the next day.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the net bottom line is don't get caught up in the minutia. Try to get to the point. Read actively, and time yourself. If you're spending 2-3 hours on one case trying to dissect it, that's way too much time. So just a very, just scan it, get the main points, and fill in the gaps during class. About managing time, you've got to create a weekly study calendar, and you've got to be disciplined with that. I think that'll help tremendously. I'm a little crazy. I even do this now. I'm not a law student anymore, but I put in blocks of time. I block my calendar, from 2 to 4, I'm going to focus on writing, or from 4 to 6, no matter what, I'm going to grade three agreements today, So I even put in my workouts, my lunchtime, even, going to church or, walking the dog. I mean, I'm so anal about it, but I get stuff done and I feel so good about it. I feel like I can, accomplish a lot the next day. But what happens is you put it in your calendar and you oh, I want to check out TikTok, or I want to go down this road, or, someone just texted me. And those are, demands on your time, and you're going to be depleted and you won't have time to get the real stuff done. So it's really important to stay disciplined.
I 100% agree with Don's overscheduling. I even schedule the time it takes to drive to school, right? Because I can't do anything else. So that's in my calendar, commute to class. I would say the ABA suggests that it should take you about 2 hours to prepare for 1 hour worth of class. So that's kind of the generic benchmark. It's not uncommon for first year students, it's closer to 3 hours, especially if it's unfamiliar material. But if you're looking, what would be quote unquote normal, the ABA says it should take you about 2 to 3 hours to prepare for 1 hour's worth of lecture. And prepare does not necessarily mean just reading cases. You've got that 2 to 3 hours. You might only dedicate 1 to preparing the cases, and then you're going to use that other hour to start running hypos, which we didn't do last semester, but we know is super important this semester.
Absolutely. I want to jump to one of the later questions in here really quickly because it follows directly with what we're talking about, but do you have to outline? I outlined last semester and eventually realized it wasn't helping me remember or apply. I was spending 80% of my time formatting and trying to get the order right. I will say off the bat that outlining is not always the solution for students. A lot of students really resonate with that technique, and a lot of students resonate with some combination of utilizing commercial outlines and building their own outlines, things like that. So you have to figure out what works for you. But I noticed that your concern was ordering things. You can use a commercial outline, get the order right, and not have to spend time doing, that part, and spend more time filling in information, making sure that you're understanding the concepts, things like that. So that's my little bit of thought on outlines, and I will open up the floor now.
Yeah, I like that question's a good one. I've worked definitely with people. A few thoughts. One, what we call an outline, we all think of as traditional Roman numeral, right? We have all the content in there. For some people, that definitely does not resonate. And this goes to that question as well as people ask, how do I perform well on exams under time conditions? One is to start envisioning the outline as an attack plan. So, and a real outline, you can bring me your long one, but I'm going to push you to do something we call an attack outline or a template or a script. So basically that's stripping away everything you don't really need and is that very problem solving type document. If I get negligence, first issue is duty, my rule is going to be this, my analysis will be filled in. Breach, my rule is this, here's my analysis. So have an attack plan. So that can look like a flow chart from left to right. I've worked with people that think that way from top to bottom. It can be flashcards, right? So you're not in a box here, but I think you always want to think whatever form this synthesized tool looks like, hopefully is going to be something you can just directly put into your exam answer and you're just filling in the analysis. So to me, that's the highest level of outline.
I am a big fan of what you just said. And what did you say? Attack outline? That's exactly what I call it. I call it my cheat sheet. But whatever you want to label it, it is really a condensed version of your notes. Just bringing it down to when you're pretty much at that at the reading period, you should have already have your attack outline done, and it shouldn't be this 70, 80 page outline. It should be condensed, just the black letter law. And when you just put in the black letter law, after you do like 100 or so hypos, I don't know how many, if you're doing a hypo a day, right? You're doing lots of hypos, you're going to see patterns. And when you see patterns and trends, you'll be able to spot the issue like that, because you'll be like, I remember I was sitting in my kitchen on the kitchen table, drinking my coffee, and I remember this issue came up. So in your attack outline, you want to say, whenever I see this, I'm going to answer it like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, boom, right? And I'm going to use my IRAC. I'm going to be very formulaic. I'm not going to be a robot, and that'll be kind of your, that's one way to look at outlines. All it is a customized study tool to crush your exams. That's all it is. So it could take any format that you want that means something to you. But I love the idea of condensing it down to, right, a short version where you're just attacking that exam.
If you didn't catch, I was making all sorts of faces while Rebecca was reading the question on purpose, because I don't think you need to outline at all. You need to do whatever you do when you need to learn something complicated. So for example, if you were going to have to repair your engine tomorrow and you had this 50-page manual on how to fix an engine, how would you try to figure that out overnight? Do that same thing for law school. I have worked with students. We go and buy wrapping paper. Right now it's a great deal because it's all Christmas paper is all on sale. Flip it over so that it's white on the back. Paper your walls. If you're a mind map person, just give yourself a big wall-sized dry erase board and mind map. That's fantastic for Civ Pro. You can do a timeline all around your room for litigation, from injury to complaint to 12B6, and kind of think outside the box. I love Post-its. I have them in every size and every color, and they're all over my wall, and I can coordinate them. I can tuck little tiny Post-its that relate to bigger Post-its. Oh, this is a sub project of that project. It does not have to be a fixed thing in your computer. That's just let go of that idea. It can be any way that you would organize your life or learn something new.
Wonderful. We are coming up on the hour, and I will say we barely touched our planned, discussion notes, and we're not even going to be able to get to all of these questions. So I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who came and who participated. Bobby is going to drop my information in the chat. If you have any specific questions that you would like me to direct to any of our panelists or for us, please let us know. We'll try to get those answered for you. I think we have time probably to answer one more question. We have about 8 minutes left. So
I saw a question about what to do for summer jobs. I thought that would be a good one. If
a great way to end.
I didn't want to go first. I just thought that would be a good ending question.
No, please. No, that's wonderful, actually, because that was, I saw that question come through and I was like, wow, I can relate to that, right? Like I applied to a bunch of summer internships my 1L year. And I will say I was outright rejected from some of them because of my grades. And that, it is what it is. That's par for the course in that. But I ended up with a wonderful internship at Twitter in San Francisco in their legal department. And they didn't ask for my transcripts, not at all. And then my second year of law school, I worked for a local company that does electrical grid regulatory compliance. Again, nothing with my transcripts, right? And so my grades definitely had an effect on my ability to work in certain sectors of the legal world, but they're not going to predispose you from having really, really cool and interesting summer experiences.
I totally agree that grades matter in certain contexts, but only very small. So if you want that like big firm job in that big city, maybe that might matter. But a lot of other places, it's less about the grades. So for example, I interned with a judge. The judge didn't care about the grades because I wasn't going to be writing opinions as a 1L summer. He just wanted to know he liked me because I was going to be following him around all summer. And so it was just, does this person like drive me nuts, or do I actually don't mind that they're tagging along to all of my meetings? So sometimes it can just be about rapport, but if you're looking for getting into that conversation, right? How do I even get to them to talk to me? I really recommend practicing a script, 60 seconds max, 30 to 60 seconds of how you're going to address your grades. Own it, right? I didn't perform as well as I had hoped in the fall because, and if there isn't a because, this is the one time in your life where I'll let you not finish that sentence. You can just say, I didn't perform as well as I had hoped. If you don't feel like sharing the application part, that's okay. However, this semester, spring semester, I have already fill in the blank, show action items that you have taken. Employers like people who can accept feedback and who are self-motivated to improve. And so if you can show steps you've already taken, they're going to love that. And then you say, and because of that, I'm really optimistic about how this spring semester grades are going to look. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to work with you and go right back in to why they're going to be you're a great fit for their firm. 3 sentences, solid. You're not thinking about it. It is, it's just coming off super confident and super chill, I think is the easiest way to kind of address that. And if they super care about grades, oh well, someone else doesn't, I promise you. And so just keep putting your resume out there and you'll find someone.
Yeah, I have one brief story to take off on this, and this is not made up. I had a 1L who came into law school, had work experience, was really excited to perform well. His background was in education, right? 1L goes, grades are not where he wants to be. Does a summer job. And the big thing we tell people is just do something your 1L summer. It doesn't have to be paid. It doesn't have to be prestigious. It could be anything that gets you some experience, right? RAing for a professor, volunteering, right? So he comes back 1L after 1L year. He's in my 2L class. We work together. The grades improve, right? Grades improve throughout 2L year. Still doesn't land a great 2L summer job. He approached me last semester after 3L job interview season. He said, my grades just consistently did this, this, this. And that big firm job that some people really want that was in San Francisco, they interviewed him and they said, we noticed your grades took a significant increase after 1L. Can you tell us about that? And he said all those action steps that Professor Trychta just said. And they said, that's great. We want to hire you because of who you are and you're interviewing. And we just needed to see that you can improve and you took the action steps. So 100% possible to do that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that even though it's first year and most of you are in second semester of your first year, still should be making those connections and just meeting new people and being open to those opportunities. Get to know your career services office. Kind of take in all these wonderful resources at your law school. Make those connections. Even though you're in the thick of studying, carve out a little time for that. And I think it'll serve you well.
Well, I have to say this was a really wonderful experience, and thank you so much to all of our panelists for volunteering their time today to answer these questions, and hopefully all of you who attended got something out of it. We really appreciate all of you attending as well. We couldn't do this without an audience, so thank you so much. And like I said before, if you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. This recorded version will be sent out to all registrants who opted in for that as well. So you'll be able to look back on this if you want to revisit anything. And yeah, thank you all so much.